Like the media is reporting something that Nancy Pelosi is kicking off.
Here, it's not exactly clear because all Nancy Pelosi's actually quoted as saying here is win big. I think it's more like this starts with the media and they go, What do you need to do to ensure a peaceful transition of power? And she's like, win big. And they're like, Nancy Pelosi says in order to ensure a transition, they do this stuff a lot. So it's not clear. But either way, even if Nancy Pelosi were to say it, then it's kind of maybe it did start with her, but then it's kind of revealing in the fact that it's like, so Nancy Pelosi just says something and the entire media just fucking jumps to.
Because I thought, I don't think they're going to make an impeachment push, but this sounds like a pre-impeachment push campaign to see if they can rally enough political support that Trump would not step down peacefully. So therefore we have to impeach him and not allow him into the next election.
Right.
That sounds like the card.
But that, I agree with you, but that sounds like almost everything that the Democrats and the mainstream media, which is just another arm of the Democrats, has been doing for the last 2 years.
Right.
It's everything is setting a table for the entree of impeachment. And would this work? And kind of feeling out, would this work? Would this work? All right. So back to the article. Recalling her mindset in advance of the 2018 midterms, Pelosi told the New York Times, if we win by 4 seats, by 1,000 votes each, he's not going to respect the election. Trump would poison the public mind. He would challenge each of the races. He would say, you can't seat these people, she added. We had to win. Imagine if we hadn't won, or don't even imagine. So as we go forward, we have to have the same approach. So now the idea is that Trump would have said, don't seat these people if there had been close congressional wins for the Democrats. Now, forget the fact that the president has absolutely no power to say, don't seat a member of the legislative branch of government. The president has no authority over the legislative branch of government. If you've checked, the president is the head of the executive branch of government, and they're supposed to be co-equal branches of government. Now, the Congress has basically abdicated, 80% of its responsibility to the executive branch, but that's on them. Like, they could take that back anytime if they truly wanted to. And this is like what fucking, Nancy Pelosi, by the way, has done this her whole... When Nancy Pelosi first became speaker back in 2006, they ran on the idea that they were going to defund the war in Iraq. Like, we're going to end the war from the House. And they just never did because they don't have the balls to do it. But they could do that at any point. Congress can end wars. Congress is, by the Constitution, the ones who declare wars, and they control all of the funding. And the House controls the purse strings. They could end whatever the fuck they want to end. But, they don't. Anyway, so this is what Nancy Pelosi said about the midterms, that somehow Trump... Now, she also says in there that... let me just read this quote again. He would challenge each of the races. He would say, you can't seat these people. He's not going to respect the elections. Now, there's just something interesting here. These are very different things to say. So it's not like... Are you saying he's going to poison the well? He's going to not respect the election? He's going to tell people they didn't really win, there were shenanigans there? Or you're going to say he's saying we can't seat these people? Like, one is an action and one is just saying. I don't think... Anyway, whatever. Back to the article. That might sound like an exaggeration from Pelosi. I love when they put little things like this in CNN articles where there's a little line where they're like, now this might sound like a batshit crazy conspiracy theory. I get where a normal person reading this would be like, are you out of your fucking mind? But it's not. This might sound like an exaggeration from Pelosi. An attempt to gin up her base in advance of the 2020 presidential election. It isn't. Since the moment he won the White House in November 2016, Trump has shown a willingness, actually more of a proclivity, to entertain the idea that there is some sort of broad conspiracy aimed at trying to disenfranchise conservative voters. All right. So, I don't know if this is unique. We literally, on the last episode, played the clip of Hillary Clinton talking about how there's a conspiracy on the other side to get her. She always was saying there's a right-wing conspiracy to get her and Bill Clinton. And there actually is a conspiracy to get Donald Trump. This has just been kind of borne out and proven. I mean, there was a legit deep state conspiracy to get Donald Trump. Look, you can feel however you want to. There's no denying what just happened to Donald Trump. They started spying on Carter Page because they said he was a Russian spy. This is what they told the FISA court, right? That Carter Page was a Russian spy. Okay, well, Muller just did a $30 million investigation for 2 years, subpoenaing all these people, interviewing hundreds of people. And they found out that there's no Russian spy. If Carter Page was a Russian spy, that would have definitely been in the Mueller report, right? Oh, there was this one. Oh, did we have any collusion between Trump and Russia? Well, we did have this one Russian spy who was advising the Trump campaign. It's like, no. Okay, so this, even if it wasn't a conspiracy and or even if it wasn't intentional and they just got it wrong, this did happen to Donald Trump. Anyway, whatever. The idea that they're trying to disenfranchise conservative voters, well, I don't know. I mean, look at what the social media companies are doing. It's not that crazy. Anyway, back to the article. Less than a month after his 2016 victory, Trump launched this Twitter tirade. In addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote. If you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally, it would have been much easier for me to win the so-called popular vote than the Electoral College, in that I would only campaign in 3 or 4 states instead of the 15 states that I visited. I would have won even more easily and convincingly, but smaller states are forgotten.
The second half of that is a very fair statement, which is essentially saying, when they initially said, hey, listen, he's not a legitimate president because he didn't win the popular vote, his argument was, no, that's not the way the game is played.
Yes.
If we were playing the game for the popular
Sure.
vote, I know how to win games, and I would have won that game.
Look, it's like if you're in the World Series and you win the first 3 games 1-0, you lose game 4 20-1, and you win game 5 1-0. And you're like, I just won the World Series. And they're like, yeah, but there were more total runs scored by your opposition in this series than by your team. And you're like, right, but I won 4 out of the 5 games, and it's a best 4 of 7 series.
Those are the
and
rules.
These are the rules. And, oh, by the way, in game 4, I pulled my starting pitcher and just put in what we basically threw the game. We were like, okay, we're not wasting any more of our guys. We'll come back and win game 5 because that's the game. So I would have played this thing in a whole different way. We would have tried to run up the score in game 1, 2, and 3. This is a ridiculous way to look at things. And yes, so that's a completely reasonable thing. Now, I guess what they're talking about is that he claims that millions of illegals voted.
That's unsubstantiated.
That is unsubstantiated for sure. However, you can't really prove that they haven't either. The truth is that most of this information isn't released. There's lots of states that straight up won't do investigations into this, any audits into it, and you're not allowed to require ID in most of these states because that's horrifically racist.
And the machines were hacked by the Russians anyway, so why bother?
Well, that's right. So yeah, exactly. Anyway, so they say Trump didn't then, and hasn't since, offered any evidence for that claim. He lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by just under 3 million, the largest popular vote deficit ever for a president who won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote. He convened a commission to study alleged election fraud, of which study after study has shown simply doesn't exist in any sort of widespread manner, but eventually disbanded it. What Trump hasn't abandoned is his belief that somehow, some way, Republicans, and him in particular, aren't getting a fair shake in these elections. Quote, in many places, the same person in California votes many times, Trump said at the official White House event in West Virginia on tax cuts in April 2018. They always like to say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. Millions and millions of people, and it's very hard because the state guards their records. Well, okay, I mean, look, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say Donald Trump doesn't just say some things that he can't really back up. But, maybe to prove him wrong, the states should stop guarding their records. Whatever. All of this is really kind of beside the point. Earlier this year, speaking at a fundraiser for the House Republican campaign arm, Trump again raised the specter that his side was being cheated. We've got to watch those vote tallies, I keep hearing about the elections and the various counting measures that they have. He added that Democrats won all of the close elections in 2018. There's something going on, he said, telling the assembled lawmakers that they needed to, quote, be a little bit more paranoid than you are, okay? He offered no proof to back up this claim. The point here is that Trump has a long record of making wholly unsubstantiated claims about election results, and that includes doing so in an election, 2016, in which he won. It's not much of a stretch then to imagine that Trump, if he does come up short in 2020 election, wouldn't be willing to simply go quietly into the good night. Yes, it is. That is a huge, huge, huge stretch. So Donald Trump has basically said, I think there's some like shady stuff going on with these elections. I think some, illegals are voting. They're not being honest about this stuff. It seems a little shady that the Democrats win all the close elections. Okay. This is what Donald Trump's been saying. So it's not that much of a stretch to think that the 200+ year constitutional government will be over if Donald Trump loses this election, because he will refuse. He will basically start a civil war to stay in the White House. It's like, yes, that is a giant stretch. That's a big stretch. So basically what they're saying is that Donald Trump, he comes into the White House, he wins against Hillary Clinton, and he talks up his big landslide victory in the Electoral College and how he had these huge crowds. And this is Donald Trump, by the way. If you haven't figured this out yet, this is Donald Trump. Everything he says is about how great Donald Trump is, okay? I get it. I'm not a fan of it, but this is what he does. And he'll bullshit. He'll just straight up bullshit. He'll be like, our inauguration had the biggest crowds in history. And they're like, Obama had bigger crowds. Like, nope, we had the biggest, and it's bullshit. But he'll just say that. But do you actually have to really spend too much time breaking down why he's lying about that? It's like he's lying to make himself look better. That's what he's doing. So why would Donald Trump say, I don't really think I lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton? To make himself look better. It's the same thing. It's the same dumb thing where they're like, why wouldn't Donald Trump just admit that the Russians interfered in the election to give it to him? It's like, I don't know, because that makes him look worse. He wants to make himself look better. That's what this is a man who builds big, tall buildings and puts his name on the side of them in gold-plated letters. I think he's into his own image a little bit. So that's what you've got here. He's boasting about his election victory and saying, I think we're winning by even more than what they say. And you're taking it from that and saying, it's not much of a stretch then to imagine that Trump, if he does come up short in 2020 election, wouldn't be willing to simply go into the quiet night. Yes, that's a huge stretch. Are you with me on this, Rob? Do you not think this is an insane stretch? I mean, all right, that's it. It's not that much of a stretch then to think that Donald Trump wouldn't lead a military coup to overthrow the American government. Donald Trump said that he thinks the Democrats are doing some shady stuff in their elections in Congress. Therefore, it's not much of a stretch to think he might lock them all up in prison and shut down Congress altogether. It's like, actually, that is a bit of a stretch. This is quite the stretch. All right, for Trump, refusing to admit defeat and hand over power voluntarily would be the final sacred cow he could slaughter. That's the last one. That's the last one. It's like, look, he's done everything else, man. I mean, he said he doesn't believe the intelligence community. So a violent conflict over the presidency. I mean, what else is there? It's from that to that. I mean, look, it's the final sacred cow. He said the media's fake news. What else is there left for him to do except a violent coup? Man. He's built a political career on a willingness to break with long-held traditions. Do you see the stretches that they're making here? I mean, he already breaks with traditions, right? Like, he says mean stuff, so maybe he'll break with this other tradition of not starting a violent civil war after losing a presidential election. That's a tradition. The venerated elements of our capital D democracy that have long distinguished us from the rest of the world. Trump scoffs at all that sort of stuff. The trappings, he would argue, of an arcane system put in place by elites who can't channel the will of the people like he can. Now they're just making up what his argument might look like. Like, this is what he would say when he does this imaginary thing that there's absolutely no reason to think he might do. Huh? Can you imagine being Chris Cillizza, like writing pieces like this? Like just so far up your own ass that you have to constantly start saying, like, and it's not that far of a stretch, and this is what he might say as he attempts to overthrow our government. Like, what?